Today's screencast will cover complex and compound complex sentence structures. So a complex sentence has one independent clause and at least one dependent clause. That's the minimum. It could always have more dependent clauses, but it can only have one independent clause. And the idea of a complex sentence is that it connects one main idea to a subordinate or a dependent idea. So the main clause, which is independent, has kind of the key idea of the sentence. So for example, in the box down here, I have a line from an American author, John Steinbeck. It is the nature of man to rise to greatness if greatness is expected of him. Now, in this case, I'm following this punctuation pattern up here where I've got an independent clause first, followed by a dependent clause that is started with a subordinate conjunction. Now, in this sentence, you can imagine that we're looking at it on a scale, and the main idea is in the independent clause, this idea that it is the nature of man to rise to greatness, that we have the potential to be great. Because that's the main idea, it's going to weigh my scale down more heavily on that side. In green is the dependent clause, if greatness is expected of him. And it doesn't weigh as much because it hangs on to the main idea. It just provides a condition, but it's not the crux of the argument. So a complex sentence always shows ideas that are unequal. Now, a compound complex sentence does exactly what its name suggests, which is that it combines a compound sentence structure with a complex sentence structure. So the definition of this structure is that it has at least two independent clauses and at least one dependent clause, although it could have more. Because there are at least three clauses in a compound complex sentence, there are varieties of ways that you could set up these sentences. So in this box over here, I listed just a few, but you almost have an unlimited number of clauses that could occur in this type of sentence. So there are many more ways to set up these types of sentences. The example we're going to look at today is in the box below. Although Mr. Desto isn't totally thrilled, we are going to see Moana on ice, and Evelyn and Lucy are excited. These are our weekend plans. We are counting down already. So let's break down what the sentence looks like. So on the second half of the sentence, we have a compound sentence. So if we were just looking at these two ideas, we are going to see Moana on ice and Evelyn and Lucy are excited. This would be an example of just a compound sentence. These are both independent clauses. They can stand alone as sentences. They're just joined by this little fanboys conjunction. Because they could both stand alone, they would have equal weight in the sentence. However, I've also got a complex idea going on in that sentence. It starts off with this dependent clause. Although Mr. Desto isn't totally thrilled, we are going to see Moana on ice. So in this example, the main idea is that we're going to see Moana on ice down here. So it's weighing down my sentence. And this dependent clause up here doesn't weigh as much because it's, again, sort of providing extra information or context, but it's not the crux of the sentence. So now in this sentence, I'm actually combining the compound and the complex structures. So it sort of looks like this. The heart of my sentence is in that compound section where I've got my independent clauses. We are going to see Moana on ice and Evelyn and Lucy are excited. Because they're both independent clauses, they have equal weight, which is why there's a balanced scale down here. But this balanced scale is part of a larger scale where, again, we have this dependent clause up here that's opening our sentence, although Mr. Desto isn't totally thrilled. Now, my husband might argue that that's a really relevant piece of information. However, I think he's outnumbered in that the four of us will be going to Moana on ice, even if he isn't totally thrilled. And I have to imagine by the end of it, he'll at least be excited to see how excited the girls are. So that's what a compound complex sentence looks like. And I want to wrap up today with some examples of how to fix common punctuation errors. So a couple of common errors that can occur are run-ons and comma splices, which are really pretty similar. A run-on is when you have two independent clauses that are improperly joined by a coordinating conjunction, or perhaps they might not have a conjunction at all. So you could have an independent clause with a conjunction and an independent clause that doesn't have a comma, or you might just have two independent clauses squished together with nothing in between them. A comma splice is another common error, and that's when you have two independent clauses that are just joined by a comma. So neither of those is correct, and there are three different ways you could fix these errors. One would be just make two separate sentences. The second would be to join them with a comma and fanboys. And the third would be to join them with a semicolon. So taking an example from the book we're reading right now, in green, I just made two separate sentences. Chris has a rat. His rat's name is Toby. Those are two independent clauses. I'm just going to make them two sentences to make it easy. However, if I want to join them so that instead of having two simple sentences, I now have one compound sentence, I could use a comma plus my fanboy and here. Chris has a rat and his rat's name is Toby. Both of those clauses have equal weight in that sentence. Now, if I wanted to combine them using a semicolon, I could do that here because both of these ideas are related. I could say Chris has a rat, his rat's name is Toby. You'll notice that when you have a semicolon, you don't use a fanboys to start the next clause. Also remember, as we talked about in class, semicolons only work if the second half of the sentence is directly related to the first. So it wouldn't make any sense to say, Chris has a rat, semicolon, Wellington got murdered, because those two things aren't related. So to wrap up today, go ahead and pause the video, and I've got 5 sentences here, and I'd like you just to try to identify the sentence structure, whether it's simple, compound, complex, or compound, complex, and we'll go over these later.